Welcome to the Stars Aligned Dramas and Dreams podcast, where the infinite sky meets the starry world of dramas. We're your guides to the cosmos, from heart-stopping queer love stories to straight dramas of unexpected love.
And every unforgettable moment in between that make us swoon, laugh, and cry. And, of course, we'll sprinkle in a little stardust along the way.
I'm Nixie.
And I'm Cyrus.
Each week, we'll explore the stellar journey of love, identity, and connection, one drama and one dream at a time.
So, gather your stardust, find your spot under the stars, and let's dive in.
This week, we're casting our gaze upon disability representation, letting the stars guide us through the exciting and vast world it holds.
To start our exploration, we need to understand one thing. What is disability representation and why does it matter?
Honestly, in most cases, I want to say this, representation in pretty much anything is important, but especially in things like disabilities. Because of the way we consume things, be that through books, be that through dramas, be that through social media, it is like the easiest way, both equally the easiest way to inform and misinform the audience. But the more it's used, I definitely can tell the more, not necessarily accurate, but the more an understanding comes to terms about it.
Mm-hmm.
And about different types of, not just disabilities, but anything. But in this case, disabilities.
Yeah. Like, being able to see yourself in characters is so important in a way, in the terms of like being able to connect personally to the media you consume, which is always a beautiful thing when you can see yourself in the shows that you watch, in the media that you consume, because like it makes you feel like I could be that. I could belong there.
For sure.
Like I said, a beautiful thing.
Like, is it weird to bring this one up? Like, there was an ad recently made that I absolutely love it. And it's the ad about Down syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the ad about where she's like, you tell me I can't do something, so I don't. You tell me I can't drive, so I don't. You tell me that I can't read, so I don't. And so it's like, but if you tell me that I can, then I will. And so it's like, it kind of gives you chills because you're like, they are very well capable of doing things normal if we treated it like, treat it like it's normal, but in the sense that like you understand it. Like, I wanted to preference that because certain disabilities need certain attention, but like not in the attention that you outcast them. Like that's what makes a disability 10 times worse for that person.
Yeah.
1,000 times. Like that's what I loved about that ad. Like, I know that's such a weird left field in the sense of what our topic is in like things in shows, but like that ad itself just bringing forth like having that kind of disorder and stuff like that, and people always view that as like they're not able to really communicate well, or they're not able to really do anything for, like, you know, the parent or whoever has to be a whole guardian over them. That's not necessarily true. And it's the mindset you gave them. Like, in some cases, sure, but some are actually pretty capable. Like, it depends who they are and how you push them. Like, it's the sense of it's like how some of my favorite stories and dramas I've watched, like, for example, Flower of Evil. That one doesn't have to do with disability. Well, actually, kind of. I take that back. But what essentially the topic, though, was in terms of, like, the theme was that you can turn someone into a monster if you constantly push them like they are one. And that was my favorite lesson of Flower of Evil, because they called him and they claimed that he was a monster. He didn't really become a monster, but like he was pushed to that edge to become that monster because he was constantly blamed to be that. And that's something that I really like seeing representation of, is the humanity can really shape someone.
Yeah.
And especially how you view something with limited knowledge that you honestly refuse to look more into is why you can also destroy someone itself.
Another good example of what you were just talking about is like the Untamed with Wei Wuxian, because that poor boy went through so much just for people to call him a monster.
I do think, though, unlike Wei Wuxian, who he never became, I don't think he ever remotely did anything that made him a monster due to their actions, even when he was resurrected. I do think Flower of Evil, he came extremely close to becoming that monster portrayed that everyone put on him. He didn't, because he ends up being similar to Wei Wuxian to a certain extent, to where he was technically just doing his best, man. Like this, what was what did he have? It wasn't schizophrenia, was it? Because I think he was a disability representation too, to a certain degree. I just don't remember. He had some sort of mental thing, to the point that he would, even after he was married and stuff like that, he would literally watch videos of how to smile, how to look sad, how to like look like you have these emotions, because he wasn't capable of conveying emotions. So I don't remember what his thing was.
Was it antisocial?
Something like that. He just wasn't good at portraying emotions, and I think he was great at reading emotions. I want to say he had very high EQ and
I would
IQ.
say that, yeah.
So I think he was capable of it. He just couldn't portray it back. And so he had to like watch a lot of things to try to portray that, to the point that his wife never knew up until
she knew.
Yeah, until she knew through the storyline. But like she became his wife, had kid. Was it a kid? Had a kid. I don't know.
Daughter,
I don't know why I thought there was two, but no, yeah, their daughter with them. And then later got to learn more about her own husband. And oh, that's such a good series. Highly recommend it, by the way.
This is very good.
It's one of my top K-dramas. It's so good.
I agree. It's very good. Disability representation is just like the portrayal of a disability in media can be accurate or not so much. And like it's so important because like any representation, when done well, is meaningful to a whole community of people.
It is, and I think that's why things like BLs and GLs have gotten bigger, because it has started, it's pulled out more of the community, and I genuinely feel like the community itself has kind of grown and has like come forth a lot more. And so therefore it has allowed these shows to go further than where they were originally probably would have gone for, especially with social media platforms. I don't know, because there's, you know, as people say, I don't know the other side of media other people are on, but I'm on the side of media where I see a lot of reactions, and like I think if this had been maybe not even like 6 years ago, but like, you know, 6, 10 plus years ago, there's a lot of things that never would have been brought to the surface under, especially the queer community itself.
Yeah.
Like terms, or like properly what, you know, things are like. Just like how I want to see more, and personally I have a story that has one as a lead. I want to see more trans rep in better representation, because I appreciate that Thailand actually has a lot of trans representation, specifically trans women. But up until like the few years, I really didn't like the portrayal of them, because it almost made them like clown-like, you know, more of like the was a comedy relief character. And like there's nothing wrong with that, but it is if you do it excessively. And they did. But I like, now we're starting to get more. It's why one of my favorite side couples is Daisy and Touch from Secret Crush on You.
My Secret Crush on You, yeah.
Because it was a trans couple pairing, and we haven't been seeing that at all up until then. Or not really. Not done well, at least. And Touch was so caring, so like attentive to Daisy, and I was so obsessed with it. I want more of it. Like, I literally want a spinoff for them, but we probably will never get that.
No.
And I want more of those.
Unfortunately not.
So like I said, representation means so much to communities, especially the more it starts like coming to the surface, and the more it gets used and like practice and everything like that, and be like, yeah, this is a thing, and you know, maybe you should realize it's a thing, you know. And it's just like, it goes both ways. This could be on both negative, positive things, unfortunately. But
yeah, it is what it is.
So like, it's very important.
Absolutely. Since we now understand the basics, let's break down the constellation of disability representation, mapping out the stars that connect to reveal the deeper layers of meaning we're exploring.
To navigate this constellation, we'll be focusing on how prevalent examples, their significance, and the future impact of disability representation.
We start our exploration with prevalent examples, where we'll examine the heart of disability representation and explore how it is essential to understanding disability representation.
I know we already gave some examples, but like to lean towards like actual series with like the disabilities you really think of. Like, for example, this week's series Satellite, Pluto, with blindness And that's not even like the scratches the surface of how many stories that have that same disability as well. Like Crush, a Chinese drama, has it, starring Yanjun as the lead. Or technically The Untamed
Yeah.
kind of has it. Last Twilight.
Well, that's how it's so good.
Yeah, it is. And there's so many more with that one. Mainly because it's a I feel like it's the most used one to a certain
It
degree
is used kind of it use a lot. It is used a lot. Yeah.
as elements in series.
Mhm.
Um or outside of that one, you've got like I like how the most recent actually this one, the blindness. I like how recently, when done correct, we're getting better representation of blindness, like as in it's not just black. As in like
Yeah.
there sometimes there's a side, maybe it's a pinhole, you know? Maybe it's just like one little thing. Or maybe it's like just distorted kind of like vision.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's just like a certain light that comes through. Or there's multiple ways this can be done because like you can even get out of blindness and get into like semi blindness, but like color blindness or face blindness or I feel like face blindness has been used a lot recently. Like my unicorn girl has it. Rich Man Poor Woman has it, as well as his Thai remake has it. There's quite a few of those to a certain degree. And then you have like Color Rush, which is like which is like
Also face blindness.
oh my
Johan
god.
has face
I
blind.
forgot
Yeah.
it had face blindness in
Johan
it.
has face blindness and can only see Johan, and Johan has
Yeah, that's right. One of them was colorblind, basically, and the other one was face blindness.
mhm.
But yeah, I forgot that show also had that. That's insane.
Mhm.
Wow. Wow. Okay. I just wanted to bring it up for the color blindness, but yeah, there's that too. There's that too. Except for that color blindness, very exaggerated. Not at all how that works. But I like it
Yeah.
anyways. Not good representation for color blindness though. But it is
Like it
kind of for
wasn't
face blindness
presented
to a certain degree.
as
No, it wasn't.
it like the color blindness in that show like was like kind of presented as a completely different thing.
Mm-hmm.
So like it kind of is, it kind of isn't. More of like a fictitious kind of disability,
Mm-hmm.
if you will, that has roots in real life.
So yeah, but branching out a little bit more, one of the recent, like, it's definitely been used before. Like, it's kind of like with face blindness. And this has to do with the fact that a lot of the most popular ones that I feel like are used are senses. So we talked about hearing, about sight. We're
Yeah.
going to move on to hearing, is what I meant to say. So, like, another one now is hearing being used. I admire that we have come so far. Like, just like with blindness, now we know a little bit more, like, more about it, like the pinhole, like, maybe it's like that kind of thing
Mhm.
instead. Now, with deaf things, we're getting to the point that, people are starting to find out that deaf doesn't also mean silence either. Like, they
Yeah.
might can hear, like, very muted sounds or something.
It's a spectrum, and like
Mm-hmm.
hard of hearing also like falls underneath it.
Like one of the best representations I love about that I have, I'm not gonna lie, and I feel so bad about it, and it's only because of my ability to be like sometimes I get stuck on a series where it's like I own or have the books, and so I won't let myself watch something until I read it, and I've read it technically. My problem is I've been so busy that I haven't been able to get back to it to make sure that I read past the series, and that is I Hear the Sunspot. And unfortunately, I have not seen the series itself, which I will soon as I can have time to get away from the podcast for a little bit to read the manga and then watch the series. But I have, on the other hand, seen. I've read I think 2 of the manga books, and I think there's a total of 6. I believe. I think there's a 7th one coming out. Can't remember on top of my head. But I've read 2 of them and seen the movie that it was originally that was based on the first book. I know the series goes further than the first book, if I'm correct, because I think one of the characters that doesn't show up until the second book shows up in the series. But what I loved about it so much was the representation of like it's Kohi and what was the other one? Tachi? I'm trying to remember their names off the top of my head. Where Kohi like essentially runs into Tashi and he ends up giving him his like meal and whatnot. And later when he like asks Tashi to like take notes for him in class, and Tashi's like, why? And he's like, because like I'm like deaf and you know whatnot, and like I can't hear. He's hard of hearing. And he finds out later, he's like, why is it that you can understand me? Like, you seem to react pretty well. And Kohi's kind of like, because you're loud. I can always find you. Like, your voice, you just talk naturally so loud that, like, it's easy for me to understand you. And, like, it's actually very precious because, like, there's a scene that was actually sad, but it was still precious, where, spoilers, sorry, but where Kohi and Tachi were getting along or whatnot, and Tachi was, for some reason, I don't remember what it was, but I think he was getting a little too in his head about something, and he ended up mumbling through something, I think while he was eating the food that, because Kohi would, like, give him food, like, for, like, in exchange for the notes was food, and Tashi was totally here for that. And so he would always ask his mom, and to the point that he even tried to make food for Tashi, and like some of the food he would give him was like his handmade food. And he went to give him something, and I don't remember what Tashi like mumbled, but he mumbled it, and Kohi didn't know what he said, and so he tried to get Kohi to say what he said, and he was like, oh, never mind, don't worry about it. And it triggered a trauma response because it upset Kohi because he grew up being around people and shamed by people because they would have to repeat themselves or they would have to speak up louder. And so he would always get the phrase, don't worry about it. Like, you know, and that's why, like, a lot of times he had the mindset where he ignored like a lot of these things, but it was unfortunate because he also knew that a lot of people viewed him kind of negatively because of how difficult, quotation marks, it was to communicate and talk to him. And it was so sad. But like back to the representation, something I loved about the series was like not just that we get to learn that he's on a spectrum, that he can technically hear to a certain degree. Actually, I think he was still losing his hearing because I want to say he started fearing that he would fully lose his hearing and wouldn't be able to even hear Tachi at some point. But what I liked is like Tachi like one time asked Kohi if he knew sign language, and to the point that I think a girl from the sign language like club tried to come up to Kohi signing, and Kohi like not to the girl but like tells Tachi he's like, honestly, he's like, it doesn't make sense. He's like, it's kind of useless because he's like, he's like, one, I wasn't born deaf. He ended up, he just started losing hearing at some point. I don't remember what the full cause. I think it was just a genetic thing or something like that. I don't think it was like he got hit by something or anything like that. I don't think there was an accident that caused it. I think this was just like a natural like progression kind of thing that he started losing his hearing. I think it was one summer before like between like before college or something like that. I don't remember, college or high school, whatever. He started losing his hearing and had to go to the doctor and couldn't hardly hear any things anymore. And so I think this was more of a progression kind of thing that just like started kicking in at some point as he got older. And so for him to know sign language was in his mind like, why, like, yes, it's important because like, you know, he could learn to communicate if he ever fully goes deaf, but he's like, I wasn't born deaf, so sign language wise, why would people just automatically assume I have to know it? And so he was like telling Tashi, because he's like, I don't like, he's like, I don't know it because like I'm deaf, but like that doesn't mean I know the sign language itself, because like the way he accumulates sign language, and I kind of liked that in the sense that it was like trying to show the representation of like sometimes a struggle even in the disability community itself, like him not knowing his own like the sign language for him to sign to communicate even to other deaf people, or like even like at some point, I do, if I remember correctly, he does eventually learn sign language like to do it, because later on he kind of started wanting to take it more seriously because she was like, you know what, maybe this would become useful, you know, because like his hearing was, I think I think progressively was trying to get worse. But I don't remember too much because I think there was a scene, if I remember correctly, unless it was in reverse, if that makes sense. Like I don't remember because I want to say Tachi also tried to learn sign language for Kohi as well. I don't. It's been a rough. It's been a rough minute. Okay, it's been a good while. It's been almost well over half a year and a lot of consumption of a bunch of other stuff. So it's been a good while. I don't remember who it was, but one of the two I remember sign language. I like you, and the other one didn't know that's what they sign languaged until later on, and they were so upset about it because they were like, "Oh my god, they sign language, that right?" And that's a sad thing to kind of leave someone on because that you didn't know that's
Yeah.
what the sign language was. That's what it was in sign language, and so like it does play into the story a little bit at some point, but it was still just the initial like brought into being like, why would Kohi immediately know sign language? He's like, I don't understand it because it wasn't a necessity until now, or it didn't feel like it would have been a necessity. It was an assumption people brought onto him just because they learned he's deaf. And so I liked sorry, that was a long talk about that. But I really liked that representation in that story for the deaf community. And I know there's more like
Moonlight Chicken.
was it Moonlight Chicken?
Hmm. With because Heart or
Heart, yeah.
Gemini.
Have not seen that. I need to watch it
You
still.
should. It's so cute. I will say Heart and Li Ming are the best part of that show, in my opinion.
For a lot of people, I feel like it was.
I've got a little bit of a bias. Like three of my like top ships were in that show.
We know.
Earth Mix, love them. Jimforth, love them. First Cow, love them. All very good. But even with that, Heart and Li Ming, best part of the show. Because I get the Sunspot. Like Heart wasn't born deaf,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't quite remember if it. I also think it was like a gradual thing. No, I take it back. It was an accident
Mm-hmm.
because it was a sudden thing. Because like, he went from being able to live his life, quote unquote, like a normal person. I hate Art's family. To him losing his hearing, being like confined to the house, and not being allowed to go anywhere or do anything.
Mm.
Until Li Ming shows up delivering some like food to the house. Honestly, shenanigans ensue. Li Ming breaks something in their very expensive house. Technically, Heart breaks it. Li Ming takes the blame for it, and starts coming around to like kind of work off the debt, and starts like coming closer to the Heart to the point like where like Li Ming is like the only person who like treats Heart like a normal person like that he interacts with, because like his parents like refuse to learn sign language, like refuse to interact with him in a normal manner. Because I hate his family. It's real bad. But like Hart does know sign language. He learns it, and then Li Ming like slowly throughout the series starts like learning more and more to be able to communicate with Hart, and it's honestly very precious.
Isn't there a line where Hart tries to speak?
He does.
Was there ever an explanation why he chose not to speak? Because being deaf didn't mean you couldn't speak.
I think it's because like he went so long without trying because he didn't know how to like a lot of
You know what I'm saying?
like the way people's yeah, a lot of the way people like regulate like their speech pattern and like the volume and like tone of like their voice is through like the vocal of it, not the audio of it, like hearing yourself back. Like you don't really think about, if you like you can hear, you don't really think about like the way your vocal cords move in regard to the sounds you're making. So like, well, if deaf people can talk, some of them like choose not to
Mm-hmm.
because of the way that they can't. It's harder for them to regulate and like know what they're sounding like.
Oh no, for sure. I was only asking because of Hart's situation, being that he could hear before and then wasn't like I know for sure people definitely born deaf have a harder time talking because they don't know what it sounds like. And so like while they can talk, it's more depending on like how much someone like urged them to pronounce things. Like I mean, because you could probably be urged enough to pronounce it perfectly, but a lot of times it's I don't want to say muffled, but like it's not perfect pronounced. Like it's because like I've seen and heard some before, but the only reason I was asking because I didn't know if maybe it was just like trauma and like I get it. You don't know how loud you're talking if you can't hear anything at all, and so that's why I was just curious because I was like, but yeah, I could see that. I could see that's why having gone so long and that leading to why he like couldn't speak as clearly anymore because that would definitely that's like if you were bedridden if you that's why you have to
Mhm.
go through physical therapy after a lot of things trauma like things or having not been in motion for so long. And so like no, I could have
Most
seen that
definitely, yeah.
have happened to Hart. I was just curious to see if there was something story plot wise that was explained.
And there may be. It's been a long time since I've seen it, and there may be, like, more of a trauma, but I don't think there was. I think it was just it kind of being him being isolated and, like, not having anyone to talk to, so he just kind of lost that for a bit until he felt comfortable enough with leaving.
I don't think there was because a lot of people kind of trashed on Hart a little bit for that scene because there was no explanation behind his talking. And I think a lot of people were like, "Oh my god, why is it you can't talk straight when you know you had hearing before and you had perfectly been able to talk before then?" Because I remember that being a whole issue when that series came out and that came to surface, and people didn't really think too hard about the fact that when he had gone so long not speaking, and so your motor skills was like very weak in that regards. So I really don't think there was because I remember seeing a lot of hate towards that when it first came out. And there's more examples, but I feel like we need to put a pause on this and move on because unless you have more, because we kind of mixed a little bit of this segment with the next segment because this technically should have just been strictly examples because the next segment could have been what we talked about a lot of going into those, and that was my bad
Very good.
because that was more in depth about the disabilities.
We didn't touch on, like, any physical disabilities or mental, really. We briefly mentioned, face blindness, but that's kind of a gray area, but they also have tons of examples for them. We've just been here for a while, and we need to move on.
With that being said, we shift our orbits and we find ourselves in the importance of disability representation. This new path takes us deeper into disability representation, uncovering hidden connections and unfolding new layers. So, deep diving a little bit to what we kind of already did, like I said in the last one. This time, I think we'll just essentially just choose to deep dive a little bit more into other things because I think essentially this session should have had was like a little bit of like, talking about how we get more like better representation and like how
Mhm.
being blind works or like how death is a spectrum and so kind of things like that. But like you mentioned a little bit a minute ago of we haven't gotten to physical disabilities that weren't sight and sound, but also mental disabilities.
Mhm.
So like bringing those up, there are quite a few of those. Like, and those, depending on the series, I feel like get portrayed more so as story plot things that
Yeah.
people overcome, when in reality, there are quite a few mental ones that you just can't overcome, but you can at least try to make them better, if that
Mhm.
makes sense, mental wise. I don't know if this is a great example. And I don't know if you want to call it PTSD or something else. But what about Until We Meet Again? And the representation, just in the sense
Oh.
of like how traumatized, like from I know it's fiction kind of disability to a certain extent because like it was trauma from another life and I don't think you're
Yeah.
really gonna
But, like,
see much
probably
of that
could
in real life. But
definitely
like the
had some, like,
trauma part.
PTSD. Yeah.
That yeah, but the trauma part wise of it was intense. Sorry, I had to thought about that one. Then again, I think there was also trauma in Wind Team as well.
And what?
I think trauma was just everywhere
Yeah, fair.
in Until We Meet Again.
Yeah.
Like we we literally open up on a double attempt. So I don't want to use the actual word. And so it was wild of a series. I personally love the
Yeah,
series, but
it is very good. Trying to like rack my brain. Like, I know I headcanon a lot of you, you guys' depressed little babies. I feel like diagnosed depressed. Same thing with like anxiety, PTSD.
who?
I'm just these are ones that I'm like I feel like you may have a little bit of depression, anxiety, PTSD, autism running through your blood, but that's just headcanons.
Another interesting representation in disabilities is OCD,
Yeah.
obsessive cleaning disorder. And I mean
Mhm.
like extreme level ones. Like,
Yeah.
though most of the time in rom-coms or just the romantic dramas, it is expressed a little, I would say a little fictionist to a certain extent. Like, I'm sure
Yeah,
OCD is a little curable, but and it can be this
it
extreme,
takes a lot,
but
yeah.
it takes a while. So, like for example, I'm Not a Robot has it. So does About Is Love, which is a Chinese drama. And so there's a few that take it a little extreme, but like it's still there, is what I want to say. Why I'm using it.
Like OCD is one of those another one of those that I feel like is highly misunderstood and misrepresented as like this oh cute little quirky thing when it's in reality is and can be like debilitating,
Oh, for
like
sure.
completely like all consuming.
I think what's scary about OCD is that OCD is so misunderstood to the point that like people,
Hmm.
like, correct me if I'm wrong, but like people think that OCD means that they want everything clean. Not
Hmm.
necessarily germaphobe level, sometimes can be germaphobe level. Want everything clean in a nice order,
Yeah.
but in reality, sometimes that could just exist outside
Yeah,
the home.
that's
Sometimes their home could be completely a mess and everything else triggered. Sometimes it's in the home, everything else doesn't get triggered. Like it's so many different ways. And sometimes there's that plays into like things like ADHD, autism. So like there's other things that branch into to why it's portrayed so differently for each person.
OCD is like a lot of people think about it is like oh like everything has to be straight prim proper in a certain order, but in reality it is much it's not really that at all. It is much more the intrusive thoughts of
Mm-hmm.
if I don't do this particular way at this particular time in this particular manner, this horrible thing is going to happen. And like constantly being just like stuck on that and like not being able to move on from that thought without doing that thing in that particular moment in that particular manner. Like that it's just it's so much more than what a lot of people think of and what is typically portrayed.
Mm-hmm. But like I said, correct me if I'm wrong. Like OCD can be linked all back to like autism, ADHD, in which that
Mhm.
then also turns around and why it's so different for person to person.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I still want to say I definitely wasn't diagnosed with like heavy OCD, but I remember getting tested for ADHD as a kid, coming up negative, but also being told that I had a certain level of OCD. And now as an adult, I'm like, I definitely do things that are so like that focus wise, ADHD wise, that could have absolutely or like telltale signs that I possibly have this, you know? And like I said, it isn't until recently that that's even surfacing that we don't even like. All the studies for ADHD have always been on men, and it isn't until recently
Mhm.
that
Same thing
women
with
are
autism.
completely different, and therefore my testing could have been 100% wrong, which would have made sense because my for starters, my brother tested positive. Okay, for ADHD. Okay, that sounds like I'm saying it's a bad thing, and it's like that made it sound like you're gonna test it for like COVID or something. I don't mean it like that. I'm just saying for the test to show up that yes, you have it. That's what I was saying,
Mhm.
positive. But my brother was diagnosed, is what I was trying to say, that he had ADHD. I wasn't when I was tested, and I'm as I got older, went through college. I struggled so hard focus through college because my life of like organization, like school forces, even with person with ADHD, to be more in line because there's a schedule that I'm forced into. Like I still struggled even in school, but it got worse when I got into college because one, during the COVID, and so things were online, and so trying to stay with online stuff, and then there were so many other factors that like messed me up that I literally went to my mom and I was like, I started evaluating a lot of things and behaviors, and on top of that, I wasn't just to her. I wasn't because like I things I had researched. I knew not only that if I had it, I also knew which parent had it if I got it from someone, because like I knew damn straight that it was not my dad. It was not my dad. It was definitely from my mom. My dad had no symptoms of ADHD. My
Yeah.
mom has insane symptoms to the point that not only did I bring it to her attention and was like, hey, is there any way I can be tested to see if I have it again? On top of that, do you think you might have it? Because like it definitely also like I also on top of that even knew that it would have came from her dad. Like I was like because like I know my papa.
Yeah.
Like he also behaved very much like it. And so I was like, there's so many things like because it's hereditary. So I was like, it had to come from someone. And while it might not be strong, I was like, it's still definitely there. Like that's why I've said this all the time to Cyrus, but there is a day I am looking forward to someone listening to our podcast and being like, listening to Cyrus and Nixie talk sounds like an ADHD and an autism trying to have a conversation. Because that's what it sounds like to me. Because I talk way too fast naturally to the point that if I try to slow myself down, I feel like I'm forcing myself. Like literally, it's so hard for me to slow down my speech, and I feel like I've gone into like a robot mode, and it's so hard. Cyrus, on the other hand, they overthink every single word they're saying in their mind. So like our speech patterns are so different. And I also get to see that in editing, which is wild. So like that representation I feel like I'd love to see more of, better portrayed. And even if it's like the OCD and it's just certain aspects brought forth and not the main one, because
fair.
it's such a complicated disorder to like really portray anyways.
Nixie talked a little bit about like her like suspicions of having ADHD. Like I am undiagnosed, but I highly suspect I'm autistic. While like I've done a lot of research into it, and a lot of things line up. And like Nixie was saying, like it does have like a strong link to like genetics, and because of just the way like my life was like I was raised, like I didn't meet my father or his side of the family until I was a lot older, and it wasn't until I met my older half brother and like realizing that like we are practically the same person despite not growing up together at all, and him being 10 plus years older than me, and like him talking about like his autism, and I'm like, okay, this is where I got it. Okay, this makes a lot more sense now, because now I have a link and I know where this comes from now. So like that was very affirming to a degree.
But like we were saying, the things we see in dramas or like read in books and whatnot, this representation means so much because like
Yeah.
we kind of get to see it grow if done correctly as it goes through, their series and whatnot. We get kind of a better, more informed viewpoint on it, especially I feel like now that people do better, just depending on who they are, of course, researching the things that they're going to tell the audience and stuff like that
Yeah.
properly and being like, I'm going to look into the thing I'm going to present to people. And so that's something that I think is why it's so important for there to be the representation that constantly comes out. We constantly get more of, and as it goes, the better it gets. Usually, most times, not always. Depends on how bad the information is.
Finally, our third focus is the future. This is where we highlight its significance in understanding the deeper layers of disability representation. Like what Nixie was kind of just saying, typically gets better the more it is in like the in media and in the public's eye, because
Mhm.
with exposure education kind of follows, and it's a cycle. So would always love to see more. I think it's always, when done right and done well and is well researched, it can be really meaningful to a lot of different people for various reasons, but would also be so down for like more disabled
Mhm.
actors being placed in these roles, like portraying their own experiences, because that's where
Rather than having
authenticity.
actors play those.
Yes, absolutely.
Because we get a lot of the cases, like, I get it depending on what it is, because there are some where it's not possible, like, in the sense of, like, if it was, it would just be very, very difficult, if that makes
Hmm.
sense. Like, not that it's impossible, but it would take a lot of effort. But I love when we get people who actually, like, for example, like, like BLs and GLs, having people who are actively in the community itself
Yes.
playing these roles,
Yeah.
because to them this isn't just acting like, I'm in love with the same gender, or with like trans person, like this is, or like someone non-binary, whatever. This is like, yeah, that's my life, like that's something I am actually attracted to, not necessarily to say that they're in there to be attracted to the other one, because
Yeah.
that's a ridiculous mindset, but it is because they know what it's like.
Yeah. They can kind of portray like their experiences more authentically,
Mm-hmm.
because like they have like that, like like those like their real feelings attached to it.
And the same with like disabilities,
Absolutely.
especially when it would give more opportunities to people who didn't think that they could ever do
Yeah,
that.
absolutely. One of the things that I like wish we like would kind of like move away from in the future, because it happens so often, but like a lot of times in these stories, happens a lot like with in recent times with like the blind characters, where like they regain their sight at the end, and like
Mm-hmm.
being like, presented like, oh, like this is like the better life, like I'm fixed now, and I'm like, that I wish we'd move away from that, because a lot of
I agree.
like there's something about it that like, yes, like it does happen, like there are surgeries, and like sometimes like it does work out for people, and like, but like a disability does not diminish quality of life. It's just a different like lifestyle, and like I wish like we would kind of like embrace that, rather than
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, like how do I fix, quote unquote, fix myself.
I agree. That's the same with what I was trying to say earlier with like some of these mental illnesses, like the face blindness and stuff like
Hmm.
that, because oftentimes they just get their memory back in the end, or their not memory, sorry, their sight was cured, their blindness, and so it was kind of like, but like in reality, like I get it if it's a story plot driven like thing, because like whole point of a story plot like driven like cause thing is usually to overcome something at the end.
Hmm.
But like in reality, representation wise, that's, depending on what it is more than likely not going to happen. And therefore, if you were able to portray that outside of that disability and make it more accurately, maybe give it a
Hmm.
different plot element, or maybe you give the ending, that ending is a lesson that's more authentic and accurate.
Yeah,
That's what I would prefer to see.
I agree.
We've broken everything down. Now it's time to put it all together. In this segment, we'll share our thoughts on the disability representation as a full constellation and reflect on its total impact. We love to see it, and it's a great thing to have, because
Hmm.
without it, then the awareness isn't there.
Yeah.
To the point that this goes beyond disabilities. This goes to like I said, awareness of like certain things that go on, like with rights and whatnot, like depending on what you want to get into. We're not going to get into that because we were talking about disabilities, and we don't want things going up in conversations and stuff like that. But in disability terms, it's the representation of putting it out there, having people see this representation or hear about it, or however, because depending on what it is, that hey, people are you're getting to see yourself in the media and stuff you consume.
Absolutely.
And just like that, the constellation is fully drawn. We thank you for joining us for this episode of Stars Align Dramas and Dreams podcast, where we meet amongst the stars that illuminate the love stories that light up our universe and connect us all.
If you've enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe, and share your stardust and thoughts with us. We'd love to hear your comments, favorite moments, or suggestions for what we should explore next.
You can connect with us in the comments or through our socials, as well as our email that are linked in the description. Let's keep the conversation going under the stars.
Until next time, keep dreaming, keep listening, and remember, love always shines brightest in the cosmos.
Bye.